I returned home later than I had planned. The streets were half empty, but the air held that strange evening stillness, as if the city weren't sleeping, but merely thinking something over in silence. At home, I left the lights off for a long time. I wandered into the kitchen, drank water from a bottle, and listened to the sounds in the pipes. I wanted silence, but it was so deep it felt almost sticky. I left a small night light on in the hallway, so its soft glow wouldn't intrude, and went to the bedroom. The bed was cold, but welcoming. I lay on my back, covered myself with the blanket, and stared into the darkness for a long while. No thoughts, no emotions, simply allowing myself to slowly drift away. Toward the end, I could barely feel my own body. Sleep was washing over me in a steady wave. And suddenly, something glinted in the dark. A single flash, then gone. I thought of a reflection from passing cars, but the windows were shuttered. Again, this time longer. Two small glints. Then they blinked. I didn't have time to react. The paralysis hit me instantly. Eyes open, mind clear, body stone. At first, I tried to deceive myself. I thought I wasn't fully asleep yet, that if I just strained hard enough, everything would let go. I tried to move my tongue, then my toes, then at least to change my breathing. Nothing. Not even resistance, just a void, as if the commands were vanishing somewhere along the way, never reaching my body. My breathing became short and alien, as if someone were granting it in portions. Pauses appeared between breaths, too long, dangerous. I caught myself thinking that if I didn't inhale now on my own, there might not be another breath at all. I couldn't swallow. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy like an extra weight. I tried to focus on small things. I counted my heartbeats, looked at the familiar shadows on the ceiling, searched for something stable in them. But the shadows didn't help. They seemed too precise, too motionless. And in the darkness, directly opposite the bed, two eyes appeared. They didn't glow, they reflected light, in a foreign way, as if inside them was a smooth surface that gathered every crumb of darkness. At first, they just watched, didn't move, didn't blink. They simply were. I felt them not only with my gaze, but with my chest, as if something were pressing from the inside, forcing me to keep my eyes open. The muscles around my eyelids tensed to the point of pain, but they could not close. I suddenly realized that blinking was also a movement, and movement no longer existed. There was air between us, but it seemed unusable, thick, hostile. I was lying in it as if in water. Then they blinked, sharply, like a human's, but too synchronized, too perfect. And then came a whisper, "You are not sleeping." The voice had no direction. It didn't resonate from the eyes or fill the room. It emerged inside me, between my thoughts, as if it were an extension of my own mind. I wanted to protest, to say, even mentally, that this was a dream, that I was about to wake up. But the thought cut off mid-word, as if someone had removed the end of the sentence. The eyes grew closer. No sound, no footsteps. I realized this not by distance, but by the sensation of pressure, as if the layer of air between us had vanished, as if I were now lying not in the room, but somewhere inside that gaze. They blinked slowly, drawn out. This time, not like a human's. One eye blinked later than the other. Then vice versa. "I've been watching you for a long time," something whispered in the dark. You simply never looked back. I suddenly remembered nights when I woke up for no reason. Moments when it felt like someone was in the room, but I would immediately shut my eyes, turn away, and pull up the blanket. I remembered, and I understood that this was exactly what it meant. The eyes shifted right, left, then they rose higher, as if whatever was watching was slowly, almost lazily, changing the position of its head. I felt it studying me. Not my face, not my body, but my capacity to look and to realize. The silence suddenly grew thicker, and the eyes blinked once more, but this time vertically, as if the eyelids were closing from the sides rather than top to bottom. "You do not know what it is like to be in the darkness," the voice said, closer. what it is like waiting for you to finally look at me. The eyes became even closer. I saw them so clearly I could distinguish the outlines of the pupils, strange, oval, overly elongated. They narrowed and dilated not from light, but from my fear, as if fear were a signal to them. I blinked at you many nights in a row, it whispered, but you close your eyes every time I wanted to talk. The eyes grew larger. They approached the limit of visibility. They were far too large for a human face. Too close to me. I felt something pulling my attention forward, dragging it out from the inside, forcing me to look, not to blink, not to flee even in thought. As if I stopped looking, I would stop existing here. Do not close your eyelids. The voice became hollow. If you blink, I will blink too. A pause, and I will be closer. The eyes blinked, and truly, they were now an arm's length away. I tried to inhale, to break free, to even move a finger, in vain. They blinked again, now directly in front of my face. I saw the pupils slowly gliding over me, as if memorizing, as if storing something for later. I like it when you watch, the voice whispered. Keep your eyes open. Keep them. Do not close them, because if you close them, the eyes widened, glinted. I will be inside when you open them again. At that moment, my eyelids betrayed me and twitched, and the paralysis vanished. I lunged, covering my eyes with my palms. When I looked around, the room was empty, the darkness motionless. But on the floor where the shadow had stood lay two small glints of light, as if someone had left their eyes for a second and taken only the shadow, but not the light. The day had been long and strange, as if stretched thin. Several times I caught myself thinking about things that had long since ceased to matter. Old news, overheard conversations, random phrases caught between floors. It all swirled in my head without order, failing to settle into meaning. I returned home after dark, ate dinner in silence, and didn't even turn on the television. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, so much so that the sound of my own footsteps felt unnaturally loud, as if someone were following behind me. Before bed, I opened the window to air out the room. A chill drifted in along with the smell of damp earth, even though there was no forest or park nearby. The scent was stubborn and deep, like the aftermath of rain somewhere far outside the city. I shrugged, closed the window, and lay down. I stared into the darkness for a long time until my thoughts began to crumble and my eyes closed on their own. And I fell asleep. I woke up, or so it seemed. I realized immediately that I couldn't move. My body was heavy, as if nailed to the bed. My breath was shallow. My eyes were open. Stay calm, I thought. This will pass in a moment. I tried to wiggle my fingers. Nothing happened. There wasn't even the sensation of tension, as if the command simply never reached my body. I tried to change my breathing, to take a deeper breath, but my chest barely rose, as if something were holding it down from the inside. Don't rush, a foreign thought appeared. Quiet, calm, not mine. There is nowhere to rush here. The air entered in fragments, with delays. Between breaths, pauses appeared, too long, unnatural. In those pauses, I had time to think that the next time, the air might not return. See? Something whispered between breaths. You have time. I wanted to protest, but the thought crumbled before it could become words. Don't speak, the voice said. You've been silent for too long anyway. In that silence, I heard a sound for the first time. Thud, thud. Slow, heavy footsteps. Not in the apartment. It was as if they were very close, yet not quite here. As if another space had appeared between the rooms, where someone was moving without fully entering. This is a dream, I tried to convince myself. Just a dream. Here, the voice answered evenly, but not entirely. I wanted to turn my head toward the door. I couldn't. My gaze remained fixed on the ceiling, but my hearing seemed to stretch forward. Thud, thud. Do you hear it? The voice asked. Those are the steps of a man who is in no hurry. Because he knows You aren't going anywhere. Then a smell appeared of raw wood, bark, and iron. It didn't wash over me all at once. It emerged gradually, as if the air were changing its composition. Do you remember? They asked quietly. This is the smell of something that has waited a long time. And then I realized that someone was standing by the door. Standing by the door was a forester. Tall, broad-shouldered, in an old dark jacket. His face was half in shadow, but I could see a thick beard and calm, cold eyes. In his hands, he held an axe. The blade was dark, blunt at the edges, but heavy. I felt its weight without even touching it. He didn't look at me right away. First, he surveyed the room, slowly, attentively, the way one surveys a plot in the woods before starting work. Not my forest, he said in a low, steady voice. But the wood, it's familiar. He took a step forward. The floor didn't creak, but I felt a vibration in my stomach, in my ribs, as if something heavy had moved closer. You are lying down, the forester said. That means you are growing. I'm not a tree, I tried to say, but no sound came out. Not even the thought had time to take shape. The forester approached the bed and set the axe down, blade first. The tip touched the floor. A dull thud. After it, the silence became even denser. I don't cut what is living, he continued. I cut what has already stopped. He leaned over me. His hands were covered in old cuts, his fingernails dark, as if from the earth. You are silent, he said. That means you aren't resisting. I can't. I finally managed to try. I can't move. The forester nodded slowly. That which does not move, he said, is always ready. He lifted the axe, not sharply, slowly, with the precision of a man who knows the moment. Don't be afraid, he added. I cut clean. The blade hovered over me. I felt a pressure in my chest, as if I were being pressed to the ground like a log before the chop. The boundary between my body and the bed vanished. I stopped understanding where I ended. Wait, I thought. Please. You are already waiting, he answered calmly. And in that instant, the paralysis vanished. I sat up abruptly, gasping for air, feeling my heart pounding in my throat. The room was empty. The door was closed. No foriste, no axe, only silence. But in the morning, I noticed a deep indentation on the floor by the bed, as if something heavy and made of metal had stood there for a long time. And when I inhaled, I thought I could still detect a faint smell of raw wood in the air, as if someone had stopped by to look to make sure that I was still here and decided to return later. Last night, I had a sleep paralysis dream. The day before had been strangely empty. Not difficult or tense, just as if something had been removed from it. I did ordinary things automatically. Ate, replied to messages, cleaned the room. Several times I caught myself forgetting why I had entered another room. Thoughts broke off mid-sentence. Before bed, I stood in the bathroom for a long time, looking into the mirror. The light was too bright, so I turned it off and remained in the semi-darkness. My reflection vanished faster than I expected. It seemed odd, but not frightening. I lay down in bed, flat on my back. I rarely sleep that way. My eyes closed quickly, and I fell asleep. I woke up, or so it seemed. I couldn't move. My body was heavy, as if under anesthesia. My breath was short. My eyes were open. At first, I wasn't afraid. There was only wonder, dull, detached, as if I had woken up not in my body, but beside it. I tried to wiggle my fingers, nothing. Not tension, not a cramp, but a total absence of effort. The intent appeared but found no place to anchor itself. I tried to change my breathing, to make it deeper, sharper, but my chest only rose slightly and fell again, obediently, evenly, not at all how I wanted. The air entered in small portions, as if it were being rationed. Between breaths, pauses appeared, too long, unnatural. In those pauses, I had time to think that the next time, the air might not return. And this thought wasn't panicky, it was businesslike, almost mundane. I realized I couldn't swallow. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy as if it no longer belonged to me. A feeling emerged that silence was not a consequence of the paralysis, but a condition. As if something had decided, no one speaks here, not even in thought. Words began to disintegrate before they could become sentences. And that was when I saw the figure by the wardrobe. It stood straight, motionless. A human body, arms, shoulders, chest, an overly perfect posture, too composed. For a few seconds, I tried to convince myself it was a play of light, a shadow from the furniture, an optical illusion. But a shadow has no density. And here, I felt density, not with my eyes, but with my chest, as if an extra weight had appeared in the room. Only a moment later did I realize what exactly was wrong. There was no head. The neck ended abruptly, without jagged edges, without traces of violence. Not blood, not a wound, simply an absence. A dark place where a face should have been. An emptiness that didn't swallow the light, but rather seemed to have no need for it. A cold realization washed over me. It hadn't been standing here only since the moment I woke up. It had been there before. I had simply only just begun to see it. The entity took a step. The floorboards creaked quietly, a familiar domestic sound. That was what made it unbearable. If the sound was real, then everything else was real too. It approached closer, and I noticed it didn't move like a human. The step occurred before the body could catch up with it. It was as if this form lacked something that usually governs direction, as if the decision to move was made separately from a body. "You see," came the sound. The voice didn't come from above. It resonated from within the creature's rib cage, dull, hollow, with a slight echo, as if in an enclosed space. But I do not. I felt fear slowly detach from my body and become something independent. My body was motionless, but the fear was moving, growing, searching for an exit. The entity stopped by the bed. It slowly raised a hand. "I lost it," the voice said. "Long ago." In this long ago, there was no time, no years, and no days. It was a word describing a state that lasts as long as it needs to. Fingers touched the blanket. Coldness immediately traveled up my body, not across the skin, but deeper to where one usually senses the boundaries of oneself. I stopped understanding where the blanket ended and I began. Without a head, it is easier, no thoughts, no fear. It leaned over. The air above the bed became thicker, heavier, as if space were trying to accommodate its form. I felt pressure, but not physical, the pressure of presence. But someone must watch. Someone must remember. Its hand settled on my chest. Not heavy, empty, as if not a hand had been placed upon me, but the place where a hand used to be. I felt something begin to pull from me upward. Not my body, not my soul, but the capacity to realize where I was. Space was falling apart. The ceiling, the walls, the bed lost their meaning. All that remained was a single point where I still existed. "You lie quietly," the voice said. "You will fit." I understood that fit meant not consent, but compatibility. A function, a purpose. I need a pause. Ed. In that moment, the fear changed. It became deeper. It was a fear not of death, but of continuation. The fear that I would wake up, but no longer be whole. And in that instant, the paralysis vanished. I sat up abruptly, gasping for air. The room was empty. The wardrobe was closed. Silence. I touched my face. Everything was in place. But in the morning, when I looked in the mirror, it seemed to me that my reflection did not mirror my movement for a split second, as if something was still deciding whether it was worth looking along with me. That night, everything looked far too calm. Not cozy, just calm, the way things are before something that requires no noise. The day had passed without tension, yet without substance. I had hardly spoken to anyone, I caught myself answering automatically, not listening to the words. Several times I simply sat by the window, watching the ravens circling above the yard. There were more of them than usual. They didn't fret. They didn't take flight with cries. They simply changed places. The roof, a street lamp, a tree, the roof again. Their cawing was short and dry, as if they were exchanging coordinates rather than sounds. I thought it was just a flock, just an evening, but the feeling wouldn't let go. Before bed, I looked out the window one last time. One raven sat directly opposite me, on the balcony railing. It didn't move. It didn't tilt its head. It stared straight at me, not with curiosity or a threat, but the way one looks at an object they have seen before. I held its gaze for a few seconds, then closed the curtains and lay down, deciding it was just ordinary fatigue. Sleep came quickly, without dreams, without transition. I woke up, or so it seemed. My consciousness was clear, but my body wouldn't obey. I realized immediately sleep paralysis. My arms were heavy, my chest barely rose, my eyes were open. It wasn't a sharp fear, rather a cold realization of a familiar state that felt different this time. I tried to take a deeper breath. I couldn't. The air entered in short portions, as if someone were counting every breath. Unnaturally long pauses emerged between them, and in those pauses I had time to think that next time the air might not return. The thought didn't cause panic. It sounded like a fact. A sensation appeared in my throat, as if I had been silent for far too long and no longer had the right to speak. Not even in my mind. Words appeared and immediately vanished, failing to catch on to any meaning. The room was dark, but I clearly saw a silhouette by the window. At first, it seemed like a shadow from the curtains. But the shadow moved. It didn't glide, it straightened up, slowly, with effort, as if the body had been in an awkward position for a long time and was now remembering how to be vertical. The movements were cautious, testing. I felt the pressure in my chest intensify, as if someone had stepped closer, though the distance hadn't changed yet. My heart began to search for a rhythm, but couldn't find one. The beats got lost between the pauses in my breathing, failing to form into something living. It straightened up completely, a tall, thin figure. A human form, but disproportionate. The arms were too long. The shoulders were sharply raised, as if a weight hung upon them. The head tilted forward, as if its own weight were pulling it down. I couldn't tell where it was looking, at the floor or through me. Its attention had no direction. It just was. And that was enough. And then I saw the beak. Not entirely avian and not human. As if the face had been pulled forward and sharpened, leaving a dark slit instead of mouth. The eyes black, shining without whites. They didn't reflect light. They absorbed it. The darkness around them grew thicker, denser, as if the room were contracting. I felt that if I looked away, something would change without my knowledge. And it would be final. Something shuddered behind his back. Wings, not spread, folded, pressed tight, as if he were restraining them with great effort. The tension coming from them was almost audible, like a taut string. The air trembled with every micro-movement, and I felt it on my skin, even though I couldn't move. "You saw me," he said in a raspy, dry voice, like a caw that had learned to pronounce words. "So, I have come to the right place." The voice didn't come from the beak. It resonated in the walls, in the floor, in me, as if I myself were the hollow space through which he spoke. He took a step. The floorboards creaked slightly, but I felt this movement in my body, like a weak shove to the ribs, as if someone were checking to see if I was still there. "Humans think we're just birds," he continued. "But we wait. We watch. We remember those who were silent for a long time." I realized he wasn't referring to this day, nor this week. The silence was older, the kind that accumulates over years when you don't ask questions and don't look back. He tilted his head sharply, bird-like. "You are good at being silent." At those words, something inside me tightened. I tried to scream, not with a voice, but at least with a thought. But the thought broke before it reached the end, crumbling into shards. A wing unfolded slightly. The air stirred. It brought a draft of cold, the smell of rain, of old feathers, of altitude. The smell wasn't from the room. It was from outside, from the sky. "I do not take all at once," he said. "I'm Mark." That word hung there like a sign. I felt something inside me being counted, not time and not steps. A presence. He came closer. His shadow covered me completely. I stopped seeing the ceiling, only the dark silhouette hovering over me like a black cloud. When the time comes, a pause. A long one. "I will recognize you." He reached out a hand. Fingers long, dry, resembling talons hidden beneath a human form. I felt them even before the touch, as a coldness in my temples, in my teeth, in the root of my tongue. One finger touched my forehead. The coldness passed inside, deep behind my eyes, as if a mark had been left under the skin. Not pain, a label. I realized that now I could be found even with my eyes closed. "Ka," he uttered quietly, almost with tenderness. And in that instant, the paralysis vanished. I inhaled sharply and sat up. My heart was pounding. The room was empty. The curtains were motionless. No wings. But in the morning, when I went outside, a black feather lay on the windowsill. And I knew for certain it hadn't fallen. It had been left.